are about to take part in a time-traveling road trip through pop culture. A road trip with a clear destination and many stops along the way. This is but one act of one chapter of the serialized journey.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Is working on a 21st century chemical explosive out at Makapu. The Korean ambassador.
When we last left off, we continued our long odyssey into MST3K's sixth season with a possible look into Adam West's psyche, tinkered with an ineffective radio for the dead, and tolerated the endless goddamn melody that seems to follow the creeping terror. This week, we'll get shipwrecked on Murder Island, bask in the bipolar brilliance of Maria Bamford, examine the television exploits of the first producer to get his name in the opening credits, and discuss my first run-in with Ingmar Bergman. As always, I am Ryan Rodriguez, and this is the Coolness Chronicles Season 1, The History and Legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Tonight's episode.
Chapter 9, Top of the Basic Cable Mountain. Act 3, a Quinn Martin production. Author Richard Connell published his short story The Most Dangerous Game in 1924 in Collier's Magazine. If you attended middle school in the United States, there's a very good chance that you've read it at some point. Rich with allegory, it's the tale of an experienced big game hunter who washes up on a secluded island. The sole inhabitants are a Cossack general and his manservant. The general is a former big game hunter as well, but he's grown bored of tracking animals as they no longer present a challenge to him. He offers the protagonist his freedom if he can last 3 days of being hunted on the island, as the general, a Darwinist extremist, has reinvigorated his favorite hobby by stepping it up a notch and pursuing humans, the most dangerous game of all. The story plays with various themes like the motivations for hunting, the dichotomy between acting on brutality and adhering to civilized interaction, and the question of whether or not taking any life is ever justified. It's a brilliant little narrative that may be the single most non-intellectual property to be adapted for the screen, having been the inspiration for at least 17 films in the 95 years since it was published. These adaptations range in quality from the heights of 1932's The Most Dangerous Game to the lows of that one episode of Gilligan's Island where the little buddy gets hunted. Somewhere towards the bottom end of the middle is the 1961 Crown International cheapie, Bloodlust, Experiment 607.
4 young adventurers, fascinated by ghastly tales of the fantastic, hunt for and find the unbelievable.
I, who had never killed anything in my life, found myself assigned to duty as a sniper. And what had been an unpleasant duty developed into a passion, and then into a lust for blood.
A killer with a crossbow, reveling in brutal torture.
But you can't mean that you're going to hunt Johnny and Pete like you did those others. As if they're animals.
Animals? No, not like animals. I'm going to hunt them as men. Men of brains and cunning. And since the unfortunate incident involving my wife has left me without feminine company, I look forward to getting to know you both better. Much better.
Bloodlust takes the basic structure of The Most Dangerous Game and does away with all the subtext and political commentary, turning it into a relatively generic, good-looking youngsters stalked by a ruthless killer genre piece. 2 couples, Johnny and Betty and Pete and Jean, are enjoying their vacation at sea when Pete suddenly notices an island he's never seen before in the distance. Curious Pete, who must secretly be a cartographer, convinces the other 3 to climb aboard the ship's dinghy while the captain is passed out drunk and sail to this mystery island. Sidebar: if map charting is Pete's quirk, and it's not, I'm merely joking, Johnny's main characteristic is being forced to wear an obscenely tight shirt, which forces him to suck in his gut to a degree that cannot be healthy.
We fit into all this.
Where do we fit into all this?
Man, his shirt is so tight you can see his liver.
Cover for us. If the guards find us gone, divert their attention until we get to the boat. After that, I'm afraid you'll have to look out for yourselves until I can come back with help.
Okay, fine. Can we end the scene, please?
Johnny?
What?
It doesn't sound very promising, but believe me, it's the only chance you've got.
What is?
Well, I guess we'll have to take it then.
End sidebar. By the time they're on their way to adventure, the captain, Tony, wakes up and spastically warns the couples to come back to the boat, providing sufficient gloom and impending doom. Captain Tony promptly disappears from the plot until Act 3, when a dastardly secret of his is revealed, but we'll get to that. After arriving at the island, the couple start to walk into the jungle just past the beach. Johnny promptly falls into a human-dug pit, which gives the couples pause as they drop down vines to pull Johnny out. Another sidebar. It bears mentioning that Johnny is played by Robert Reed in his first credited role. Reed is best remembered in popular culture for a role that he absolutely despised, Mike Brady, the patriarch of the Brady Bunch, the Ward Cleaver of the late 60s, early 70s, if you will. Reed was a classically trained Shakespearean actor who took the role for the income and fought with creator Sherwood Schwartz at every single opportunity. The role also imposed upon him a public image that was at odds with his personal life as a closeted gay man. After the show was canceled, he starred in movies like the KTMA experiment SST Death Flight and the RiffTrax presentation The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, but made a significant impact and earned several awards through his mid-70s television work, like his role as a transgender doctor in Medical Center, a supporting role in Rich Man, Poor Man, and a key role as a physician/slave owner in the legendary miniseries Roots. He died of colon cancer, not AIDS as often reported, although he was HIV positive at the time, in 1992, just 2 years before production and airing of Bloodlust on MST3K. As a sign of respect, the writers of the show sweetly opted to forgo copious Brady references, which, given their 60s and 70s sitcom fixations, was well within their wheelhouse. Consequently, there's apparently only one joke about his role in the Brady Bunch in the experiment, and it's so tame that I am unable to remember it. The writers would find themselves in a similar bind with Raul Julia during Season 8's Overdrawn at the Memory Bank, although they handled that one, however respectively, a little looser. And other sidebar. After pulling Johnny out of his pit, they are introduced to the fiendish Dr. Below and his mute minions. Below owns Murder Island and offers to take the couples to his mansion for the rest of the night. In a subtle example of show don't tell, Below explains his backstory as a wartime sniper to the couples while standing in his trophy room, decorated with the heads of every imposing animal possible: African lions, wild boars, stegosauruses, you get the picture. Well in the quarters, the couples try to piece together their increasingly ominous surroundings and start to sneak around the premises to grasp the larger picture of their host.
Why? Oh, I still don't know what's going on here.
Neither do we.
This involves stumbling upon a funny-looking cave as minions go about their usual clandestine business of taking care of Below's victims.
This would be really suspenseful, but for the fact that it isn't.
Did I mention that Below is the Cossack general in this adaptation? If not, you should have guessed that by now. If asked to describe the production design of the Mad Doctor's trophy/torture cave, I would hearken back to when my elementary school would create haunted houses inside a portable during Halloween, and the walls would be lined with black Glad plastic trash bags. If the creases and grooves in those trash bags were haphazardly molded over with paper mache, painted dark gray, and adorned with several industrial oil barrels, a fish tank for storing dead bodies, and an old-fashioned bathtub full of acid, voila, you would have this cave. Yes. When Below's wife and other house guest Dean disappear for 2 days, Betty and Johnny return to the corpse cave and find Dean and the wife stuffed and mounted as trophies. Below finally admits his titular bloodlust and announces his intention to keep Betty and Jean as concubines and hunt Johnny and Pete, as well as mystery guest Captain Tony, who in a shocking twist is revealed to have brought many a person to the island for past hunts. Dun dun dun! Below chases the men through the jungle with a crossbow and kills Captain Tony. The girls escape the compound and come to rescue the men, and Below's neglected manservant, John Doerr...
Hold on.
No, John Doerr gets pushed into a lake full of leeches, and the bad doctor leaves him to drown. The reunited couples take a last-ditch refuge in the corpse cave where they're trapped like rats. But just before Belleau is about to kill them, poor leech-covered John Doerr makes a triumphant return and impales our nefarious villain on what the internet insists is a cross, but looks to me like a very spiky coat rack. Regardless, the bad guy is graphically crucified with spears through his wrists in what might be the goriest scene broadcast on the Comedy Central years after the entirety of Season 7's The Incredible Melting Man. I don't know what the scene is supposed to signify other than being really, really icky. The episode for Bloodlust is one of the best, starting with a prologue involving Crow in psychotherapy wearing slacks. Unfortunately for him, his therapist is Servo, who gets one thing right about the profession. Lots of questions, very few answers.
Yes. Well, describe your childhood to me, Mr. T-Robot.
I didn't have a childhood.
I see. How would you describe your relationship with your mother?
I didn't have a mother.
Ah, interesting. Have you seen Cliffhanger?
No.
Tell me more about that.
I didn't see Cliffhanger.
Well, this seems painful to you.
No.
Now tell me, Crow T, what kind of fishing lure do you think is appropriate for early spring?
Definitely a rebel nothing leaves this office, right?
Mr. Robot, everything said here today is strictly confidential.
Definitely a rebel deep-diving lure for early spring.
Yes. Ah, well, I see our time is up, Crow. We'll be right back.
What?
I'm prescribing a series of commercials.
Oh.
This sent me on a detour. That's right, we're going to discuss therapy. It really works. You can tell by the pain in my voice. Also, 1993's Cliffhanger. I was actually looking forward to this movie for two reasons. One, the opening sequence was parodied in the cold open of Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, and it was always a good way to grab my attention quick. Number two, when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was released, film fans made a big deal out of Michael Rooker and Sylvester Stallone's one scene together because it was a cliffhanger reunion. Interest double peaked. Then it started, and I was reminded that I was about to watch a 2-hour Rennie Harlan movie, and my heart sank. If I have to say something positive about the experience, I'll concede that the climbing sequences and practical stunts are thrilling. If you recall my assessment of Harlan's style from Chapter 5, I basically called him a war criminal, so complimenting him hurts. John Lithgow is the villain, and this is more Third Rock from the Sun Lithgow and not World According to Garp Lithgow. Just a lot of steaming ham. Stallone, whose involvement in this film made me consider saving this detour for our upcoming anti-film festival, plays his typical character of the reluctant superhuman with a chip on their shoulder brought back into the shit for one last mission. This mission? Climbing a rock. Rooker spends most of the movie getting the shit kicked out of him, and he's not playing a nasty hick, so it's genuinely unpleasant. But the main issue I have with Cliffhanger is the length. I love long movies, and I will usually sit as long as a director deems necessary, but they have to have some hook to justify it. It could be character, mood, pacing, story, whatever. Between the action sequences here, there's nothing holding my interest, and instead of being excited for the next beat, I'm counting the minutes before entertainment arrives. Moving on. Out of the snow, and back on Murder Island, the next host segment of Bloodlust is huge, and then it introduces a pivotal character in the pantheon of MST3K. One who would eventually play a larger role in Season 7 and take over completely as the main antagonist for the Sci-Fi Channel episodes. Mary Jo Peel's Pearl Forrester. Dr. F is naturally very nervous to welcome his mom to Deep 13, so he's cleaned up, brought in a couch, and prepared a lovely dinner. Unfortunately, while she's happy to be there, she apparently stopped by to visit someone else.
Mother!
It is so wonderful to see you. Mwah. Mwah.
Oh, you look fabulous.
Oh, thank you for the lovely card. That was so thoughtful of you. We have so much to talk about. Before Before we talk about anything else, though, there is one thing I have got to tell you about. And
Wait, let me guess. Meg Anderson's party?
Well, you're not going to believe it, but I wore the blue dress.
You didn't!
I most certainly did. And you should have seen
Mother.
it when I... What?
This segment is the perfect first appearance, setting up her apparent distaste for her son and general lack of interest in the field of mad science, which would change in the future, but more on that later. Which also gives some solid backstory to Forrester's quest for fear and respect, as he's clearly never had someone care about him. He prepares for her visit by sending up a script to the satellite via the umbilicus, which Mike and the bots dispassionately read.
Great to finally meet the mother of such a good friend of mine. Many is the time you and I have engaged in spirited hijinks. I enjoy your company very, very much.
Oh, I hope your visit from your mother doesn't interfere with your brilliant science experiments when the history of the 20th century is ultimately written in the name of one man. Will tower above all others. That man is you. Dr. Clayton Forrester. There.
Dr. Clayton Forrester, you have made the world a better place, but by staying underground.
Then poor Gypsy snaps.
Now I understand why he's so sick. Boy, I'm tempted to call her something that rhymes with bitch. Oh, I mean, she's a bitch.
I know what you mean. Oh, we got movie signs!
Fun fact, in this first guest spot, Pearl's look implies that her son inherited more than a heart full of hate from her. She has the green glasses, signature fright wig, hairstyle, and even quite the imposing mustache. The next time she appears, the hair will be more reined in, the mustache more subtle before disappearing altogether, and the glasses more Clayton-y. Segment 3 involves another guest appearance, albeit off-camera. During the hoedown on the satellite, the music is decidedly not synthesized, which is the normal method of composing for the show. There's a fiddle, and not some replication.
Woohoo! Weehaw! Eating turkey, eating cornbread, she eats skinny teas real well fed. Alaman left and Alaman right, Alaman left and Alaman right now. Promenade! Woohoo!
That fiddler is the brilliant comedian and Minnesota native Maria Bamford, whose stand-up is well worth a deep dive. But because I'm strapped for time, I'm going to discuss her Netflix show based on her actual life, which may be the best thing on the streaming service, even after being canceled more than a year ago. Let's discuss Lady Dynamite. Lady Dynamite, at least during its first season, is split between 3 different alternating timelines. In the present, Maria, playing herself, is a comedian and struggling actor who's moved back to Los Angeles after a 6-month spell. Dealing with her crippling depression and bipolar disorder, she's trying to put her life back together while trying to date, dealing with her unhelpful agent, and finding decent human connections. In the past, we get glimpses of how her career and personal life were hanging in a tenuous balance before the breakdown that caused her to depart LA, and somewhere in the middle is Duluth, a timeline that explores the actual breakdown, during which she moved back in with her parents in Minnesota while in recovery and picking up the pieces of her life one by one. Aside from superb performances from Bamford, the amazing Mary Kay Place as her mother, Ed Begley Jr. as her dad, and Fred Melamed as her agent, it manages to be the rare comedy that benefits from a disjointed narrative. It's almost impossible to predict which part of her life will come into focus at any given episode, which makes the breakdown and the aftermath all the more real, as it mimics the imprecise and jagged moods of being bipolar. It's heartfelt, uncomfortable, insightful, hopeful, and sad, all in equal doses, and treats mental illness as a part of life instead of a plot device. As someone with both overwhelming clinical depression and bipolar disorder, I couldn't be happier to see a compassionate portrayal of someone with the same issues. This is one of the greatest series of the 21st century, much less comedy series. And episode 104 has a scene that made me laugh so hard that I couldn't breathe properly for about a minute. I'll set the stage. It's the past. Maria is headed toward the breakdown, but still has a decent career. It just so happens that she's about to work on a job with a short shelf life due to extenuating circumstances and a confluence of unfortunate associations.
I play Lady Orca, and it's starring and produced by Dr. Bill Cosby, PhD. So, Cosby, SeaWorld, how can it miss?
Nobody cares, Ave Maria. Get to work, Squirt.
Another deuce from Suze.
I escaped from those Greenpeace kidnappers, and now I want to get back to my cozy tank, where crowds adore me and fish fall from the sky. Freedom is a burden. Let me in, Bill Cosby. Let me in.
Perfect, Maria. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, I'm done.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's all you do?
Yeah.
What a Freddy freeloader. What do they pay you to spit into a microphone?
Oh, I'd rather not say.
$10,000.
Okay.
Oh, my fudge on rye.
Fuck my butt titties.
If you haven't seen the show, and you probably haven't given how it was treated by the streaming service, it's an investment that you will not regret. Empathetic, painful, brilliant. Back on the satellite, Bloodlust has one more great segment in it, during which Crow manages to ruin a murder mystery dinner party with 3 little words.
Welcome to tonight's mystery murder dinner party.
I did it.
Crow!
Oh,
Jeez,
Crow.
ruined everything.
What I did this whole
Colonel
too
thing
soon.
worked up and then
Right?
God, you don't believe that.
Ooh. Hey, is this whole pie for me? Oops.
And he continues the spoiling trend into the theater, leading to another moment that just wouldn't be imaginable one season earlier.
Oh yeah, it turns out Rosebud was a sled.
Well, not far behind
Yeah,
him.
and then Crying Game?
think that's
Well,
one
Chick
showed up
had
in
a...
France.
Hey, that's...
Quinn Martin was the J.J. Abrams of his era, best known as the definitive executive producer from 1959 to 1980, a 21-year period during which he had at least one television series running in primetime every year. Unlike Abrams, Martin only made the transition to film once, 1971's The Mephisto Waltz, and never rebooted a franchise with the word star in the title. He's essentially responsible for the rise of the procedural drama, having created the distinctive formula and applied it to every program that bared his name. This involved breaking each story down to a 4-act structure, identified at the beginning of each act with a number on screen, and an epilogue. This is actually what I based the titles of this part of the season of the podcast on. He pioneered the commercial break Cliffhanger, ending each act on a suspenseful story beat in order to ensure the viewer wouldn't change channels during advertisements. He also frequently indulged in the shot-on-location gimmick, producing a show outside of Los Angeles and featuring key landmarks in the background as a way of having an exotic, novel hook. He's probably best known for his show's opening title sequences. They always featured a catchy theme song, an announcer, usually Hank Sims or Dick Wesson, reading the title, the stars, the guest stars, and the episode.
Barnaby Jones.
Robert Forster as Banyan. A Quinn Martin production. The Ford Motor Company presents the FBI. A Quinn Martin, Warner Brothers production. The Invaders. A Quinn Martin production.
streets of San Francisco. A Quinn Martin production, starring Carl Malden. Also starring Michael Douglas. With guest stars Sam Jaffe, David Z. Hall, Laurie Heineman, special guest star Luther Adler. Tonight's episode, Mr. Nobody.
Basically, if you're familiar with Police Squad but were wondering what the titles were making fun of, now you know. Fun fact, just like my cribbing of the act breaks, the voice proclaiming tonight's episode on every week of this podcast comes from the credits of The Fugitive, which we'll discuss at the end of this chapter in about a month. The marquee moment of all these shows was, of course, the announcement of Martin's name or production company, marking the first and, as far as I know, only example of an EP getting top billing over his contract stars. Despite being king shit of the boob tube, Martin's track record wasn't flawless. Case in point, codename Diamond Head. In Chapter 4, we discuss Master Ninja and the practice of a studio recutting episodes of a failed series into standalone movies for either European theatrical distribution or for the series' domestic syndication package. These days, when a pilot is ordered by network television networks and doesn't make it to series, it's unaired. But in previous decades, pilots were not only longer, often feature-length, but were broadcast before being ordered to series in order to gauge the marketplace. They would be presented as TV movies with open endings, hinting at future adventures, and in many cases, if they were well received, would debut the following fall with calibrations and alterations in cast, concept, story, and tone. But if unsuccessful, the commercial breaks would be edited out and cut footage inserted to boost the runtime, and the resulting quote-unquote movie would be sold as a standalone film. During Season 6 of MST3K, there are 2 instances of repackaged TV pilots, one of which never made it to series, the aforementioned Diamond Head, and one that did, albeit with a slightly altered title and for only 6 episodes, San Francisco International. Let's start with Experiment 608, codename Diamond Head, which aired in 1977. This episode, or film, was broadcast as an installment of the NBC Monday Movie and features many Quinn Martin staples. A gimmicky location in the island of Oahu, the 4-act and epilogue structure badly disguised in this particular edit.
Professor N. Ping from the university. Professor, I hear you and your colleagues have got some surprises for us up at McApoo.
From what they tell me, I hope we're the last men on Earth to see it.
Hey, this is a TV movie! Rip-off! Boo!
And a special guest star villain whom we'll get to in a bit. It starred Roy Thinnis, who previously occupied the cast of Martin's short-lived The Invaders in 1967, as government agent / flashy gambler Johnny Paul, codename, get this, Diamond Head. And here's where the episode, I mean movie, loses me. When your super spy has Garfunkel hair, I cannot take you seriously. His partners in crime prevention? Hawaii Five-0 star Zulu as Zulu, and character actress Fran Nguyen as, unfortunately, codenamed Dragon Lady. Their job? Stop a ruthless master of disguise from acquiring a military-designed snail-based instant death poison gas called the Cloth of Gold. Or, failing that, snag it back from him after he gets it.
Get it.
How many people died for your Swiss bank account?
A lot. We don't have exact figures yet.
The Master of Disguise, if a mustache, a priest collar, or clearly artificially grayed temples count as disguises, is played by the very young and damn handsome Ian McShane, codenamed Tree, but whom Mike and the Bots never seem to refer by any other name other than that of his long-running mid-80s, early 90s BBC character.
Hey, that's no priest, that's Lovejoy!
If you're not familiar with the name, and shame on you if so, you might know him as Al Swearingen on Deadwood, the King on Kings, or Mr. Wednesday in the Good for One Season American Gods. His goons include the guy who wanted to call the Coast Guard on Mitchell in Mitchell, and Eric Braden, star of Colossus the Foreman Project. Speaking of the Coast Guard, they play an integral part in Diamond Head's mission, which inspires quite the insult from Crow.
Jim Henson.
On deck, stand by to get underway. Hi-ho. Take in all lines. Let's go, priority 1.
The Coast Guard for men too chicken to join the Navy.
Hey!
What? Like I'm gonna get beat up by a sailor?
Oh!
Codenamed Diamond Head was directed by Jeannot Swark, who previously directed last month's featured Detour Santa Claus the Movie, was the replacement director of 1978's Jaws 2, and the disastrous Supergirl, which we'll discuss in Chapter 12. He is prolific on television, including some great episodes of Night Gallery, The Rockford Files, Columbo, some whatever episodes of Bones, Castle, Smallville, Grey's Anatomy, and my beloved Fringe, and is still active at age 81. The next pilot experiment on MST3K 614 was 1970's San Francisco International, directed by the even more prolific John Llewellyn Moxey. Moxey is also responsible for the amazing cinematic TV movie The Night Stalker, spun off into the short-lived test run for The X-Files, Kolchak the Night Stalker, and many episodes of television both here in the UK, ranging from The Avengers to The Saint to Mission Impossible, Police Story, Mannix, and the pilot of Charlie's Angels, which we'll discuss in Act 7 of this chapter. SF International, however, is not one of his better efforts. It's like Nashville, but set in an airport with, let's say, a less impressive cast.
The deep TV movie now.
Airport movies are like the watering holes of B-movie actors.
You said it.
I was actually going to answer this question in this hour of the podcast during the research phase by watching all 4 increasingly awful installments of Universal's blockbuster Airport series, but I discovered by Airport 75, released in 1974 naturally, that Zucker, Abrams, and Zucker clearly modeled elements of Airplane on this series, so I saved my research for Season 2 of this show. Suffice it to say, the series is like a trading card collection of past their prime actors, like a checked-out Charlton Heston, a bill-paying Jimmy Stewart, an embarrassed Jack Lemmon, and bit parts from everyone from Jimmy Walker to John Davidson. That's incredible. San Francisco depicts the titular airport on what is supposed to be a typical day, but is instead so eventful and chaotic that I can only imagine the crazy adventures that would happen the week after. In charge of the whole shebang-a-bang is the strutting cock-of-the-walk security chief Pernell Roberts, who starts his morning by tricking a bunch of congressmen aboard a jetliner into thinking they're going to die horribly through an elaborate phony emergency requiring the resources of every costly department of the airport.
Jeez, they overbooked the credits.
If you listen closely, you can hear the guys beating the crap out of Pernell Roberts.
All for appropriations for a new runway. Good luck with that, Pernell. His partner in crime, and possibly in the sheets, it is the year of the Summer of Love after all, is sleepwalker Clu Gulager, whose job seems to mostly mediate arguments between passengers waiting in the terminal, as evidenced by a fussy bookkeeper who lobs false accusations of assault against a damn long-hair hippie.
I just told him he could go to the end of the line like any decent citizen would.
What happened then?
And he told me what I could do.
Mostly character roles.
I don't think I have to tell you what that was.
It involved my bottom.
And then he...
But just when you start taking his side, we're introduced to the object of his scorn.
Occupation student.
Oh, he's a made-for-TV hippie.
Like peace, man.
Student?
No thanks, man. Just had
What
one.
are you studying?
Guitar.
You,
Know any Donovan?
you don't know how to play that thing?
Well, like there's playing it, you know, and there's playing it.
I know Yngwie Malmsteen.
William?
Yeah.
What brought you to the airport, William?
Bus, my friend. What else?
I'm not looking for jokes.
Looking for some pot, though. You
What's
got
your
any
business
idea
here?
where I could...
I mean, where am I going?
Yeah.
Well, there's this music festival up in Westbridge, Virginia, and...
All right. Well, what happened between you and this man?
I don't know, man. He flipped out.
Now, wait a minute.
I do not flip out. I
What
free.
makes you say that?
Well, I was just sitting there when this...
Suit? Cat? Dude?
You're sitting there, right? Cool, you know, mellow.
Satisfying.
Minding your own business. And all of a sudden, this dude's all over you. So, well, I mean, he's got to be flipped out, huh?
Yeah.
Well, didn't you expect some kind of trouble after what happened at the candy counter?
I'm not following you, my friend. No way.
Jose.
You don't remember?
Pernell and Clu, two men with names that are not names, must team up to save the day when criminal Tab Hunter, who deserves much better than this, and his gang of goons heist a departing jet with a cargo full of new currency. His methods involve posing as a priest so that no one suspects him.
All the church will do is move this guy to another parish.
Down this hall.
And kidnapping pilot David Hartman's wife so that he'll delay takeoff until the heist is successful. And as if that were not enough intrigue, little Davy Scott is dealing with his parents' divorce.
Why is the music so poignant?
I don't want to go. You know what I mean.
Yes, I know what you mean.
But they need you in Vietnam.
Yeah, she's wearing appliance green.
I'll explain it to you again.
You're a loser, and we're sending you away.
It's just that sometimes married people
Break up because of their kids.
simply have to live apart for a while.
Apart from their kids, I mean.
You're gonna get a divorce.
Yes, and I don't want custody.
That hasn't been decided.
Although because of you, it's very likely.
Do we have to go now?
You have to go now.
Acting out by hijacking a light aircraft and possibly crashing into the Golden Gate Bridge, or failing that, the Bay, in what is admittedly a very interesting scene, if only for seeing whoever was stunt piloting for the kid perilously bob and weave over San Francisco. The pilot episode, not a literal pilot, like Diamond Head, aired on NBC, but this time it was picked up to series with 6 episodes ordered. Some retooling was in order, like changing the title to San Francisco International Airport, I assume focus groups demanded more clarity, and replacing Pernell Roberts with a different Mike Nelson, Sea Hunt's Lloyd Bridges.
Sure is quiet out there. Yeah, too quiet. Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
The series aired on a common schedule of the early days of television known as a wheel format. This meant that more than one series shared a time slot, airing a short run before giving way to the next show. SF International's wheel was called 4-in-1 and rotated with Chapter 4's central detour McCloud, Night Gallery, and The Psychiatrist. Unlike McCloud and Night Gallery, it is yet to be released on home video, presumably because nobody remembered it was an actual show. Walking back a bit to the episode surrounding codename Diamond Head, it has a lot in common with the episode I paired it with. It mostly consists of a thin storyline that threads through the host segments, with Crow and Servo taking Mike for granted in various ways, only for Magic Voice to pull a Clarence the Angel and give them a vision of life if Mike was his own opposite. When they complain that he's too nice, Mike becomes a somewhat abusive parody of Robert De Niro's character in A Boy's Life. Each segment features a new complaint and a new impersonation from Mike, and sometimes the complaint and the solution don't actually line up, but there's some great moments of the bots trying to avoid complaining, only to accidentally do so, which Magic Voice seems to take delight in punishing them for. It's an episode that mostly works, but with a few odd turns. It's all worth it for the letter segment, though, where Mike and the bots have decorated the satellite in stereotypical Hawaiian garb, and the gags make you wish that the entire episode had been this one sketch.
Hey, Mike!
Yeah?
How would you like a nice Hawaiian punch?
Yeah, that sounds refreshing. I think I will have one. Thanks, Crow.
You want one?
Yeah.
You really want a nice Hawaiian punch?
Yes, I do.
Say, sure.
Okay, sure.
Remember, you asked for it. One Hawaiian punch coming up. There you go.
Great.
Hope you like it.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. Okay, I probably should read a letter here, though.
Wait! Don't read that letter yet. Let me interpret the letter in the authentic Hawaiian fashion using the expressive native dance, the hula. You see, in the hula, every movement, every bodily nuance tells a story. Here, let me see that letter for a second. Okay, here we go. What do you think, huh?
That was interesting.
Thank you.
Not at all insulting either. Yeah.
The episode also sent me on several detours through references in the theater, one of which I enjoyed, the others, well, those movies can eat me. The first involves a running gag that I mentioned at the start of the recap, never referring to Ian McShane but any name but Lovejoy. Let's go back to 1986 to very briefly discuss, well, Lovejoy.
Start me at 100. 100 for a start, anyone? 100 I bid. 100 I bid. Who'll give me 10? Who'll make it 110? I'm looking for 110. 110. 110 I bid. 110. Who'll make it 20? Who'll make it 20? Come on, gentlemen. Who'll make it 20? 120 I bid. It's with you, madam, at 120. Do I hear 50? 150 anywhere? Come on, gentlemen, that's a genuine antique. Don't come up every day. 150. 150, I bid. 150. Come on, gentlemen, I'm looking for 350. 350 anywhere. Don't lose it, madam. Don't lose it for another 50. 350 anywhere. 350, I bid. At 350. Who'll make it 4? I'm looking for 4. Any more? At 350. Are you all done? At 350. At 350. Lovejoy.
As if you need any convincing, this is a show that fully proves within the first 30 minutes of its first episode why British television kicks American television's ass. It's cheaper and less flashy, but also more rich in character and tone. McShane's Lovejoy is an impeccably charming antique dealer that is willing to do virtually anything to get his job done, especially if that means conning someone. And it's easy to see why McShane has been working steadily for most of his life. He's really hard to dislike, even when he plays an evil, murderous, old-timey pimp. And he's enhanced by a small, great cast of supporting players that add heft and a certain emotional weight to what is ostensibly a lark. The phrase escapism comes up a lot when I read about the show or discuss it with others, and honestly it's more the former than the latter, considering how lonely I am. Although I don't usually associate overcast English countryside with light, frothy fun, I can see how someone would make that connection. It's a show that, as of my writing this chapter, I haven't been able to dig too deeply into. I'm only halfway through the first series. But it's one that I truly look forward to visiting when time permits. Much less worth my time were 129 minutes of racism, misogyny, homophobia, and I guess mountain climbing.
The Eiger Sanction had more Hawaiian locations in this movie.
It's the kookiest surveillance ever.
Let's trek through 1975's The Eiger Sanction.
Clint Eastwood, the man. Eiger, the mountain. A deadly combination. Sanction, a violation of the law to enforce the law.
One of our agents has been killed in Zurich by 2 men. We want you to sanction them. Killing. It is what you do best. The target is male. He is an accomplished mountain climber.
What's his name?
We don't know. We know which mountain he will climb. The Eiger.
From the suspenseful international bestseller, The Eiger Sanction. Every character brought vividly alive.
If you come near me again, I'm gonna kill you.
Jonathan Hemlock, collector of art and women. Mountain climber. An expert at sanctions.
It's part Italian simulacrum of a Bond film, part travelogue, part mostly snooze, part surprising action-adventure, and part right-wing monster's Twitter feed. To put things in perspective, Dirty Harry was a shining example of humanity compared to Clint Eastwood's character here.
Maybe you climb again someday.
I doubt it. However, you never know. Sometimes people do things they thought they'd never do again. Like rape, for instance. Yeah. I thought I'd given up rape, but I think I've changed my mind.
Oh, you think that's bad? How about when he encounters a horrendously portrayed gay assassin who chose to give his dog the most unpleasant name?
Leave Dr. Hemlock alone, faggot. Forgive him, Jonathan, but I'm afraid faggot has not yet learned to recognize you straight. Miles. My, aren't we looking splendid, Jonathan? How long has it been? Indochina. You and me and, Henri Bob. And I haven't made a verbal blunder. Actually, it's, about Henri that I wish to chat.
Miles, the only thing you and I have to chat about is you having an incurable disease and lack the guts to kill yourself.
Good, Jonathan, very good. You've grown a great deal.
It's a shame that Jack Cassidy died the year after this was released. He never got the chance to redeem himself, which admittedly would have taken a lot of time and a lot of effort. Not as bad as politics, but close, is the plot, generous term plot, that jerks you around for 3/4 of its runtime before finally admitting that nothing in the story was of any consequence in the most unabashed, galling way. The big twist is telegraphed from a mile away, and if you choose to sit through the whole thing, hoping that there will be something redeeming other than well-photographed mountain climbing, you might swear off movies altogether. It's like an Indiana Jones movie with a heart full of hate and no central point. So basically just an Indiana Jones movie that isn't Raiders, but also much, much more boring. The final detour from Murder Island, but not of this hour, involves 154 rough minutes whose financial and critical success prove that America will love anything with John Grisham's name on it, no matter how idiotic it is.
This is like the end of The Firm, except it's coherent.
It's our first run-in with Sidney Pollack, and unfortunately not our last. 1993's The Firm.
I want to start by telling you that Bendini, Lambert & Locke is a small firm, 41 lawyers and all. But I prefer to think of us as a family. And like most families, loyalty is what we value more than just about anything. Now, the letter you got from us was the only one sent out. Because you're the only one we want. We've taken your highest offer to date and added 20%, and we'll guarantee a 10% increase the second year. It may interest you to know that most of our clients are very wealthy. Poor people rarely have tax problems. It's one of the few advantages of being poor. You should also know that many of our partners are millionaires by the time they're 45. Our offer includes a bonus schedule, a low-interest mortgage for the purchase of a new home, and the lease of a new Mercedes. Your wife can choose the color. We have faith that you're going to be with us for a long, long time, Mitch. Fact is, nobody has ever left us. Nobody.
When you have a cast that boasts Gene Hackman, Holly Hunter, Ed Harris, Hal Holbrook, David Strathairn, Wilford Brimley, Paul Sorvino, and esteemed character actress Margot Martindale, you already have 2/3 on your way to a great film. But then you add Tom Cruise as Tom Cruise, which is essentially the template of a smirking, self-satisfied jackass that also happens to be the most naive, vulnerable everyman, and things get a little wobbly. To make things worse, you have one of the most absurd plots to ever make it to airport paperback stores, given the large budget and glossy sheen that seemed to have been patented by Paramount in the early 90s. It's like a science fiction story that was originally set far in the future on another planet with a cast of hundreds of alien races that was hastily rewritten to be present-day Earth. Every mention of the firm has the same cosmic, foreboding tone as the phrase "to serve man." I was waiting the entire time for Al Pacino to show up in the role of Satan to put a little spin of realism to the proceedings. It's a drama that is unintentionally funny and a thriller that isn't remotely thrilling. So much of the drama revolves around printers, copiers, and fax machines that if you were to retitle it Kinko's The Motion Picture, you wouldn't be far off. And it only took 23 days to make $100 million in the US in 1993. I hate the movie-going public. So remember when I said that San Francisco International episode had something in common with the Codename Diamond Head episode? Yeah, it sure does. Like Codename Diamond Head, it takes one central premise that I understand and appreciate, but goes too far.
No way. Servo, I am telling you, Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go is about the Vietnam War. Would you look at side 2?
Please, the song is clearly about Bangladesh.
Hey guys,
Even George
check
Harrison
it out.
I'm Urkel.
Urkel! It's Urkel! It's a great Urkel!
That is hilarious!
Gypsy, come in here! You gotta see this!
Mike continues an Urkel impression in every sketch until the end of the fourth host segment when Torgo busts in and says that he doesn't get it. Until that point, every guest character of the Mike era shows up to laugh. Jan in the Pan, Pitch, Novena, Woman of the Future, Santa Claus, everyone. Well, it's nice to see all the writers get some airtime, and I get the satirical point of the runner that Family Matters does the same old shit every week and gets millions of viewers, while MST3K does something new for 2 hours each week and gets thousands. It's something that I tend to fast forward through, and I don't fast forward. As Paul Chaplin put it, "There are those who have suggested that basing 3 sketches on Urkel was an odd decision." No shit. Anyway, let's close out this hour of the show with a little class. My very first Ingmar Bergman film, and it all stems from the little kid steals a plane subplot of The Experiment.
Just hold that wheel real gentle.
Now keep going till you run out of gas.
I'm going to let you do this first. I'm not really sure what to do after this.
Davey, you're going to meet a man in a black robe wanting to play chess with you.
Let's discuss 1957's much-respected, oft-parodied The Seventh Seal. I had been aware of this film before I was really knowledgeable about film as an art, but through really disparate sources like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey and the teaser trailer to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like all of Bergman's work, I've been intimidated by it for years, as I am by a lot of films. Not because they're scary or anything, but because I was fearful that if I didn't like it, that would in turn make me be a Philistine. Simple. Turns out I shouldn't have worried. It's a stark meditation on God, life, death, and everything in between, buoyed by strong, engaging performances, some truly thoughtful and inspiring storytelling, and plenty of B.B. Anderson, who has a real Haley Atwell meets Sandy Dennis vibe that made me completely fall in love. If I had to pick my favorite thing about this film, and that would be a long list, it would be the stoic Max von Sydow's relationship with his Brutus existentialist squire. They spend basically the entire film having the same cosmic debate about life and death that you would have with your smart friends if you were sufficiently baked and reasonably nihilistic, but couched in an earthly realism that avoids pretentiousness and, in the hands of another filmmaker, would threaten to overwhelm the narrative at every turn. Plus, death, as featured in this movie, looks a lot like Robert Blake's character from Lost Highway, so there's something for even the weirdest filmgoer. I just hope that when death or any surrogate that I don't believe in comes knocking at my door, he'll offer some alternatives to chess, like Monopoly. I'm really good at Monopoly. And that is where we end this act of the Coolness Chronicles. Next week, we're devoting an entire hour to the cinematic poet of parking, Coleman Francis, and you'll have to judge for yourself whether or not that's a good thing. We'll learn what happens when you put acid in someone's chute, run a ragtag mission into territory that is most certainly not Cuba, tangle with Joseph Jaworski, noted scientist, recently escaped from the Iron Curtain, flag on the moon. All that and much, much more as we continue to chart the history and legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But before we sign off for the week, I'd like to reintroduce my favorite segment of the first half of this season of the podcast, where you, the listener, share with me the movies you love. It's time for Random Recommendations. This week's recommendation comes from Becca Haynes. It's Peter Jackson's third film, 1992's Brain Dead, or as it's known in these wonderful United States, Dead Alive.
On this picturesque block, in this manicured home, something evil, something terrifying, something horrifying is haunting Lionel. His mother.
I thought I told you to spray this house. The place is infested with vermin.
Although she was a little strict,
Look at this dust. It's an inch thick.
he never wished her any harm.
You look after me.
Until
Your mother's dead, Lionel.
now, whatever Mom's got
Who's your mother?
has caught on with the neighbors.
Your mother ate my dog!
Dead alive.
Dead Alive is a small, nuanced little domestic drama about poor henpecked Lionel, a lonely New Zealander with a truly terrifying mother. During a visit to the zoo, Lionel's mother is bitten by a rat monkey from a mythical island and quickly starts rotting in plain sight, before apparently dying and then rising from the grave as an infectious zombie, biting townspeople left and right until Lionel is forced to take an uncoordinated army of the dead on firsthand. He's aided in this ordeal by Vera, a local shopkeeper's daughter with whom he's trying to engage a romantic relationship, and briefly by a kung fu fighting priest, which I suppose is preferable to an ordinary priest.
Evil is amongst us. Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
If you're into blood and guts and more frenetic, shaky camera work than a lifetime of Jason Bourne movies, this is the film for you. I don't typically get queasy watching fiction, but I never also thought that I'd watch a decaying old lady slurp gross-looking custard as parts of her body fall in it, only for her to consume said parts. I'm not the biggest Peter Jackson fan, having been thoroughly bored by The Lord of the Rings, but I did enjoy Meet the Feebles, Forgotten Silver, and for some reason I have a soft spot for his endless King Kong remake. While I may be mixed on his skills as a commercial filmmaker, his early stuff definitely has a manic, mugging energy to it that sometimes make him feel like a zero-budget provocateur, and sometimes like a really immature but talented 13-year-old with negligent parents and access to film equipment. Dead Alive is certainly more of the 13-year-old persona than the provocateur, as evidenced by the climactic scene involving a lawnmower and a zombie horde that, just when you think it's reached its peak grotesqueness, goes in for a second round. And then when you think it can't possibly get any more grossed out, the lawnmower goes for thirds. This is a film that I'm not sure I'll revisit anytime soon, but I know for sure that select images have been burned into my brain with a permanence that not even years of Klonopin prescriptions and regular drug use could ever erase. And that's a good thing, I think. Thank you to everyone involved in making MST3K for everything that they've contributed to my life and culture as a whole. Double thanks for writing the episode guide that I will quote frequently in this season of the pod. I also want to thank Shout Factory for their excellent supplemental material that was invaluable to my research for this and every episode to follow on this subject. If you want to support the artists who made this wonderful show, many episodes are available on VOD at rifftracks.com. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy what you hear, please rate and review the show on iTunes or your chosen source. Share it with anyone you can, any way you can. This has been the largest and most fulfilling endeavor I've ever seen to completion, and it would be nice to keep making the show until it just isn't fun anymore. Have questions, comments, or random recommendations, or is there anything I missed in this particular chapter? Contact me on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan or on our Facebook page, and keep on the lookout for updates. Until next week, do what you love, don't be a dick, and as always...
Katie, why don't you run along now? Next week we'll learn why cows look forward to giving milk.
Coolness Chronicles is written, produced, and edited by Ryan Rodriguez. Executive producers are Tracy Rodriguez and Luis Rodriguez. Original music by Bildschirm. Please visit bildschirm.bandcamp.com for more information.